Alright gang, we're going to go into the classes now, and hopefully this will be the last video and we could do the compilation and run everything. Okay, let's go to the classes, web-inf. There has been some changes here. Good thing, the library, no changes there. We got the standard the tag library documentation there, no need for changes. Classes, let's go to the easiest one first. Let's go to business. And we have customer and customer old. Let me open up the old, customer old, the one we use for assignment number 5. And let me do a diff on this. So I'm going to do a diff comparison on the old one versus the new. And you can see that it's very similar. And customer dot... And let me just go here, make it a little bit larger. And let's do a diff comparison. Okay, now, the first thing is that I didn't include the comments in there because I'm only including the differences here. We have our package of CRUD.business, import java.io.serializable. We'll go to the first difference. Now, apart from the curly bracket that you see in the left-hand side over here, apart from that in the pink, you're seeing that there's a new data member, and that is ID. And we need that ID for the customer's ID when we're actually doing any changes to the data. So we got to get that ID. So private string ID that goes right above first name. That's the data member, private string ID. Notice that we have to do the same thing in the default constructor. Now right above where it says fname is assigned the empty string. We do the same thing for ID. ID is assigned the empty string. Notice we made changes also to the constructor with parameters. So we have to include that par ID, string par ID, because we have everything else here, string par first name, par last name, street, city, state. All we have to do is add the par, the string right here, string par ID with a comma. And we'll do the same thing down here, as you'll see. We have to add that ID to all of our to the new customer.java file. So ID is there. This .id is assigned par ID. Notice we have to have getter and setters now for the ID. So public string get ID, return ID, public void set ID, string par ID. This .id is assigned par ID, just like we did for the other data members, and also for the other getter and setter methods. Public string get fname. The only difference there, as you can see, is just that the curly bracket is different. That's all. The curly bracket is different. It'll work just the same as before. That's the only other thing. There's no other change. You can see the curly brackets. It's showing us different syntax in curly brackets. That's all that's there. The only thing that we had to change was the ID. So make sure when you do that ID change that you recompile the customer class. Okay? So everything else is the same in customer.java. All right? Other than making sure that you include the ID throughout the code. Okay, you can go back through this and pause the video, but all has to be changed is the ID. Okay, that's for customer. Now what we'll do is go into the data, and the connection pool. The connection pool is actually going to be the same. So no change there with the connection pool. No change with dbutil.java. That stays the same as well too. So there's this will be just like you had it for the for assignment number 5. No changes there, but there will be some changes in the customer DB class. Let's take a look at this. All right, so let's make it larger. And let's change the color. All right, now, first thing you'll notice is this is changed. I'll go through this rather quickly. I'm going to show you each one of the methods that we're using, and you can insert them or include them accordingly. So here, first of all, we got the package CRUD.data, import java.util, SQL.*. We're importing the ArrayList class. We're importing our CRUD business.customer class, and now this is the customer DB class. All right, let's go with the changes. Here is our insert. Okay, so right from here is our insert, and that insert will include, notice the insert does not include the ID. So we're not using the ID for the insert, only the other attributes. And make sure that you have those attribute names exactly as per the database. Okay, you could pause that right there. Now notice why here we're saying just you can code this as is, but here we're using the customer dot object variable, and you'll see the differences where that comes from as well too in another class. But just make sure you code this exactly as is. Okay, so again, here is your insert. I'm going to go through the other ones rather quickly. Here's the insert. Here's the update. Actually, I'm going to have to break this down because it's quite large. So here's the update method. We'll take it right just before the try block. Here's the update. This is still the update. Here's a try block right here. That's still the update. And again, notice where it's getting the customer parameter right from here, just like in the insert, right? We got the customer parameter right here. Well, let's go back to that update. And here it is again one more time, up to the try, including the try, and including the rest of it, including the catch blocks. Notice we're going to return, we're going to use a prepared statement and execute an update, or make a execute update call, which is a built-in and intrinsic method call, execute update. We're doing that. We did the same thing, by the way, in our insert right here. Okay? So let's just see that real quickly. Update, try, and catch block. And finally. So in the finally block, we want to close our connections. Here's a delete. Here's where the magic happens with the delete. Everything is right here with the delete. Notice we're also only deleting based upon a customer ID. So only one user. We don't want to delete more than that. We could add the functionality to delete all, but we did not, just to keep it safe. And then there's our try block and our catch block and our finally block where we return our resources back to the operating system memory. We could use this for functionality too. We're not using this as an application, but we could, and that is email exists. We're finding if a particular email exists. We're selecting a customer email from customer where customer email is a particular value. Here we're just selecting one customer. Yeah, I'm going to have to show this in sections as well too. So here we're selecting just one customer. So I'll do this all the way to the end of the try block right here. Customer.setID, set fname, or fname, lname. We're getting the string values for that, and then we're setting the values. Here, we're just setting it based upon the ID that was passed to us. So when we call this select customer, we're passing a variable, and this parameter right here says ID. So we could use ID later on in this method, as we do right here. Okay, set ID to that parameter value. So here's all the way to the end of the try block. Here's the catch and finally. So this is all part of the select method. Okay, all part of the select method. Pause that if you want. Here is for selecting all the customers when we do that in the modified.jsp file. And I'm going to pause it right here just so you can see everything from the try block. And notice that because we're selecting all customers, we're going to put it in an array list. And then in the array list, we can actually use methods with the array list. So we have an array list here. And we're saying then, based upon that array list, so we have to return an array list because we're saying that the header, the value returning data type is going to be an array list, and what we're going to do is call this method select customers, and we must return an array list. So inside of this try block, we're actually creating an array list, and that array list is called customers. Right here, new array list. That's the object variable that we're using. Then finally what we're doing is we're setting all of these values. We're creating a new customer. We're setting all of these values. And then we're using that array customer.add a customer. We're going to add an entire customer with all those values for fname, lname, street, city, state, zip. And then we're going to return an array list customers. So whatever calling environment is calling this method, it's going to return an array list back to the calling environment. So everything here up into the catch block. So this is the try block inclusive. Notice in each one of these methods we're initiating a connection pool, we're initiating a connection, we're setting the prepared statement to null, we're setting the result set to null, and then we're actually using the prepared statement, the result set, inside of that try block. Now here's a catch block, and then the finally block, what we're doing is returning the resources back, closing the result set, closing the prepared statement, and freeing the connection. And lastly, this last curly bracket here, gang, doesn't belong to the method. That last curly bracket actually belongs to the class. So when I hit when I navigate to the end curly bracket, you see that's it, and that's part of this is actually the ending right here of the select customers method. It's right here. Okay? One more after the finally block right there. Okay, so that is customer DB.java. So we're good with that. So we did all that. Close out of here. Now the only other thing that we have to do is nothing different about connection pool, nothing different about dbutil.java, but we did make changes in customer DB. The only other thing we did now is make changes in the customer info in our servlet. And there's substantial changes. First of all, we changed the name of the servlet from customer list servlet to customer servlet, and you can compare this with your own code. But the first thing what I would do if I were you is make a copy of customer list servlet. Just do Control-C, Control-V, or if you're on a Mac, Command-C, Command-V. Make a copy of it, change the name to customer servlet, and then make the following changes. So customer servlet, the first thing we're going to do is I'll make this. There's quite a bit going on here, gang. Quite a bit going on. Actually, there's a lot of logic that's happening in our application right here. So the first thing, we're going to save this, and we have to compile it differently. Different than in assignment number 5. So for project 2, we're going to compile customer servlet, not customer list servlet. So here's just some code here. I should say some comments. Same package, CRUD.info, import java.io. Here we have some more input statements, okay, and some comments. Here, line 22, we have to import the annotation class, and the reason why we have to do that is because we're giving for servlet 3.0, we could actually make the mapping using the annotation class, and we could say we could map this. It's named customer servlet. That's the name of the servlet, but we're mapping it to /customer admin. The / just means the root of the directory. The root of not the root of the directory, but the root of this application. And the root of this application is 4368 right here. That's the root of our application. So going back in here, let's take a look. All right, similar code as the customer list servlet right here. Very similar code right here. Okay, don't forget to change the name here. It has to match because the file is now customer servlet, so the name of the class has to reflect that. We're not actually doing sessions, but if you had we had time, I would have gone into how we could use sessions in our application. But this is how you actually create a session in Java Server Pages. This is only for demonstration purposes. Okay, we want to initialize some variables. So the first one is URL. We're going to initialize it to index.jsp. So that means that if all else fails, what it will do, it will automatically go to the home page right here. That's index.jsp. Okay. We have a couple other initializations of variables. Action is a variable, and CID stands for customer ID. Now 47 and 48 are only used for testing. You don't have to put this down. You can actually write out some of the values that you're getting from a file that's being passed, generally in the form field, the attributes, the name attribute of the form. You can actually capture that using the print writer, capture that using the request.getParameter, capture that, and then display it to see what values that you're getting, like this. Output dot or out dot print line. Again, you have to instantiate an print writer object variable, and here this one's out, so we could test it, but you don't need to do that. Alright, gang, well, just so that you know, we're getting data here from various files, and I put that in the comments here so that you would understand this. So here's some logic, and I want you to copy all of this, so you could pause it and copy all that, and while you're pausing that, I'll tell you what's going on here. So when the display is display customer, if the get parameter, if the name property that's being passed is display customer, what we're going to, and it's not null, what we're going to do is set the action variable to the string display customer. And then what we're going to do is use that variable for display customer again, instead of just saying, we're going to use this variable action inside of this request parameter, and you'll see where this variable is used further down in the code. And then what we're going to do is, based upon the get parameter display customer, because that's what's in the variable action, it's going to actually get the user's ID right here. Okay? So, for instance, we're here in project 2. We display the customer, and we only want a specific customer. So we're going to display that customer here, but remember, if I view the source, it's going to pass that ID along. It's going to pass the ID that I selected for that particular user. And that ID is right here. Here's one. So I can edit and delete customer 2 right here, value 2, edit, delete, and I could do it for each one. Edit and delete value 3, customer 3, edit and delete value 4, etc., etc., for as many records as we had. Okay, that's where that's doing that. And so we want to make sure that if it says display customer, if that's being passed, and also just to double check, in this view source, you could see that here where is it? Right there. This name property, this hidden input field, it says display customer. That's where the value is coming. So if the name says display customer, then we're going to, if it's not null, then we're going to assign it to the variable action, and then we're going to find out whatever value is in display customer in that action variable. We're going to assign that value, that customer's ID, to this variable called CID. We're going to do the same thing along the logic. Notice here it says the name is delete customer, and then we'll do the same thing, pass that particular customer's ID. So let's go through the logic here again. Okay, so the first one is for displaying customers. And that's coming from modify.jsp. So this is coming from this file right here, and I can put that in here like this. From modify.jsp. This is coming from customer form. We're going to add a customer. All right. So here's customer form right here. We're adding a customer. And by the way, the add is always going to be from customer form. So that's why we could always say the action is going to be add. But notice what I use for a customer ID. I use the null value. Why? Because remember, customer is actually auto-incremented. So we're not going to include a customer ID when we're creating another customer record. All we're going to do is just use the auto increment value and pass the first name, last name, street, city, state, zip. We're not going to add, we're not going to use a customer ID. Next is update. So if the value is get parameter, the name is update customer, we're going to assign that to the action variable and then get the value, the customer's value for that, customer ID. If it's delete customer, we're going to do the same thing. If it's from the thanks page, we're going to say if the parameter, and this is where the thanks comes in, get parameter thanks, and then what we're going to do here, let me just show that real quick. So in the thanks page, I showed it in a previous video. Remember that's been changed, and here you could see that the thanks, or I should say the name attribute, right here, the name attribute says thanks, and the value is join. We could get that value directly, but the name attribute is thanks, and we're saying that if the name attribute is thanks and it's not null, then we're going to set the action to join. Else, everything is going to the main page. Okay? So again, this is for the customer servlet. Here's a logic here, setting the CID, setting the action variable, and also setting the URL to index.jsp. Now, here is where more logic comes in. So let's go through each one of this. If the action variable that we created above here, here's our action variable. It's set to null initially. But if that action variable contains the value which we set, join, right here, if it contains join, the string join, we have to use the equals method. We can't use equality. We can't use equality with strings because it's an object. So we have to use the equals method. If the action variable contains the string join, we're going to set the URL to customerform.jsp. So that's why when we create a new record like this, we create a new record. That's why when we click on this return button from thanks, this is thanks.jsp, even though it looks like it's not, it's coming from the servlet, it will automatically go to customer form. Okay? And that is because of this. We're setting that URL to customer form. If we get the parameter says thanks, we're going to set the action variable to join, and then what we're going to do, if the action variable string is join, we're going to set the URL to customerform.jsp. All right, next, what happens if it is display customer? Well, if it's display customer, we're going to do this. We're going to create a customer object called user. We're going to capture whatever the variable CID has above, So whatever the variable is above, whatever variable that has, so for here, it's going to be, if it's display customer, it's getting it from here, okay? And then it's going to get that the value for CID. And then what we're going to do is we created a customer object called user, and then we're going to make a call to the select customer method. Remember I showed that in the customer DB class? This is where we're actually making the call. Select customer. And what it's going to do is going to select a customer passing the ID, and it must return an object of customer that includes F name, L name, street, city, state, zip, all of those properties. So we're making a call to the customer class, to the select customer method, and we're passing the ID for that particular customer. And the values are going into this the customer object called user. Then when we do that, here we could use our session attribute, because in this particular case, we are passing a session data. The variable value for the session is user, and we're passing the user object. So the key value pair, if you want to call it that way, the key is user, and we're passing this user variable that's right here. Okay? We could have named it something else, but we just called it what it was. And then once we do that, once we pass the value to the, we set the attribute to that particular object variable, then we set the URL to customer.jsp. Because here what we're doing is we're displaying a user, and then after that we want to see that user, so we set it to the customer.jsp file. So here, after I make a change, I want to see that user, and here is the customer.jsp file. Okay, next. So this is if we want to join. This is if we want to display a customer. This is if we want to add a customer. Now there's much more code here for adding a customer. But the first thing I'll show you is, here's the else if. Okay? And if the action is add customer, what we're doing is pulling the use the get parameter method. And here we're just setting the get parameter null for the ID because it's auto increment. But we're getting the parameters for F name, L name, street, city, state, zip, total sales balance, notes, and then what we're doing there, we're getting the values, and then we're going to create, notice the variables, they're all string variables, and then we're going to create a customer called user, object variable user. We're going to declare a string message in case there's an issue. We want to create that string message, and then we're going to use this if clause to test for null values and to test if each one is an empty string, as before. Set the message to all text boxes are required except notes if some data is missing, and then set the URL to customer form. Now else, if all the fields do have data, then what we're going to do is set the message to the empty string and pass them to the thanks.jsp file. So that's what's happening when we actually add a user. It gets processed that way. We add the user and then it gets passed to the thanks.jsp file like this. Finally, we're calling the insert method in our customer DB class, calling the insert method, and we're passing an object variable of user. And that user again comes right here. Okay? Doing the same thing, we're setting the attribute request set attribute user is user, and request set attribute message to message in this particular situation. All right, now we talked about if we're going to join. Okay, we talked about displaying the customer. Here we're adding the customer, testing for data. Now here we're updating a customer. Notice very similar, except we're not using the ID. We're using much of the same code from adding a customer, but we're not including the ID because we're not modifying the ID. But we are using the ID to indicate which customer we want to update. So here we're getting our parameters. Here we're instantiating, or I should say we're instantiating a user, and we're getting the session get attribute using the session object variable, and we're getting, or I should say using a session and using the get attribute method here for the user right here. And then we're passing that user to this particular object variable called user. There's a session that was instantiated, and we're using that get attribute method to pass all the data into the user variable. Now, what do we need to pass? Well, if we're going to modify a user, we need their ID, so we have to get that. Then we're getting the first name, last name, street, city, state, zip, phone, email, balance, total sales, and notes. Then we want to send the user to the modify page after it's been modified to show them how it's been modified. So we update the URL. That's URL, by the way, not URI, but URL. The URL variable to modify.jsp. Update, we use the class again, customer DB, use the update method, pass the user object variable. And then here, what we're doing is getting and setting the updated customers. Remember, in the customer DB, we created an array list. Well, here's where we're actually calling that array list, select customers, and we're passing that all the customers into this array list called users, and we're setting the attribute, the request attribute. We're naming the key users, and we're passing this variable that was up here, and that's an entire array list of all the customers. All right, now the last thing that we're doing is deleting a customer. So else if the action is delete customer, we're going to instantiate a user, pass the user's ID, call the select customer method, and then use the change the URL to modify.jsp. If it's something else, we want to make sure that the URL is modify.jsp. Call the delete method in the customer DB class. Then again, what we're doing, we want to see all the customers after it's been deleted, just like we want to see all the customers after they've been updated. So we call the make an array list, call all the customers, set the attribute users to this object reference here, this object variable users. We're passing this right here, this object reference. End this method right here. As you can see, it's ended. Not the method, I'm sorry. The else if clause is ended right here. Now, the only thing else we have to do is to forward the user to that particular page. Whether they're going to the index page, the modified page, the customer.jsp page, that captures it right with that URL that we've been changing all through the code above. Here is our variable. and that contains whatever page we want to forward them to. So here's the code for that. You don't have to worry about the comments. You don't have to include the comments if you don't want to. And then finally, if there are any GET submissions, which we have to do this, we have to override this, because if you have the do post, we have to override the do get, and all we do is include this code right here. Change a string to modify, show the modify page, get our list of customers because we want to show all the customers in the modify page, and then we're going to redirect them. I should say, my apologies, we're going to forward them, not a redirect, but forward them to the modify.jsp file right here. And that's the end of do get right here, and that's the end of the entire class, or I should say servlet. So when I hit P, there is it is a class, but it is a special type of class. It's a servlet class. Okay, now, what do we have to do? Well, gang, I'm going to open up, we have to compile all this. So what I'm going to do is open up assignment 5, not project 2, but assignment 5, just to show you what the differences are. So let me make that larger. Okay, and let me navigate. So I already did this before. I'm navigating to my classes directory. Okay, now everything is going to be pretty much compiled as before. So let's just do this right now. Let's go to WebINF, delete all this. So business, I'll delete when you make the changes. You want to make sure that you compile customer, so I'll do that right now. Just copy this code like this. Copy and paste. And you'll see that I have a customer class that I just created. I have to do the same thing with all my data files, so I can close out of all these, or I should say delete all these like this. Delete all my class files, start from scratch. Now I don't have to do that because we only made the change to customer DB, so I don't have to do all that, but just to show you that it will work, copy this, paste it here, and you'll see that all of the classes are created again. And then finally, we want to compile that servlet. Now, gang, remember, we're not doing customer list servlet. We're compiling customer servlet with all that code that we had. So I'm going to take this code that we have here, and I'm going to show you that we're not compiling the customer list servlet. We have to make a change here. But I'm going to copy this, and you'll see the right code in Project 2. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put it in here. And all I'm going to do is take out list, because that is the correct name. Customer servlet, not customer. We're not doing this one. We're not doing customer list servlet. We're doing customer servlet. So make sure that you compile that servlet. Hit enter, and you can see that it compiled. It's a class right now. And what you want to do is make sure that you invoke shutdown .bat. You shut down your server after you created those classes. Start it up again. See if there's any errors in startup. Don't see any errors. Looks good. Take that off to the side. And let's run this bad boy one more time just for grins and giggles. So I go to P2, make it a little bit smaller. Let's look at the data. Okay, I'll do select all from customer. Right now I have 7. The last one was entered was John Doe. I got a Jane Doe. Let's do one of my favorite wrestlers back in the day. Ultimate Warrior. So we'll do Ultimate Warrior. We'll just put some dummy data in here and try to do some cross-site scripting. Submit it. And that works. Let's up arrow, select all. You see I have 8 records now. New Ultimate Warrior record here. Let's do the return. That works. This is going to the customer form.jsp file. Let's see. I just used a back arrow right here. I could go back arrow again. I could do add button. That's going to customer .jsp. Here I could do display the customers. And here I see Ultimate Warriors here. I could do a search on Ultimate Warrior. So Ultimate. You see that shows right there. I could subtract all those characters and I see all the rest of the data. I could do a sort by last name. I could do a sort by first name. I could do pagination if I had more than 10 records here, because the lowest number is 10. So I could show the entries. Also, I can edit. So let me edit the first one, Bobby's 3 Sue. Let me change that to, I'll just change it back to, I'll do Bobby's, so you could see that there's actual change. And instead of notes 3, I'll put in some, I'll try to put in some scripting here and see if that works. Bobby Z, and notice it did this correctly. It edited correctly. Let's go to the data to see if the data is actually modified, and you can see Bobby Z right here, and the EM for notes right here. Okay. Next is we want to see if this bad boy is deleting. So let's click on here, use a delete. We get our prompt, and okay, it's deleted. Let's see if the actual data is deleted, which it is, as you could tell. So it's back to 7 records. And that is it, gang. That is Project 2. If you have any questions, please post it to the discussion board, and see you all in class.